You're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast, and on this episode, we continue our conversation with Daniel Richardson, one of the producers behind the upcoming documentary, Slasher Trash. Here we go. Welcome to the Fan2Fan Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Bernie Gonzalez. With me, as always, fellow co-host Pete Charbonneau. And on this episode, we continue our conversation with Daniel Richardson. He's one of the folks from CreatorVC. You may have heard of that. They are the people behind the In Search of Darkness, those epic multi-hour long documentaries that have covered both the 80s and 90s horror kind of stuff we grew up watching, rented at the video store. And now the same folks are putting together Slasher Trash, a documentary, the ultimate slasher documentary. We had a great conversation in part one with Daniel, talk about the roots, the fandom behind slashers, a genre with multitudes within horror. We keep that conversation going in this episode as we continue the interview, but we thought it'd probably make sense. Let's put this at the beginning of the episode, because if you like slashers, we think you'll love Slasher Trash. You want to get ready to plunge into this 4-hour deep dive into the gritty world of obscure, low-budget or no-budget slasher films that were released in the 70s, into the 1980s. So beyond Halloween, beyond Friday the 13th, it's really this celebration of underground slasher subculture kind of movies that you may have heard of or never heard of. Maybe check them out at your mom and pop video store, or it's that one thumbnail that you just happen to click on your favorite streaming platform. Diehard fans are going to love this. It's produced by the creators behind CreatorVC, the same team behind the In Search of Darkness series. They've worked on Aliens Expanded as well. Again, epic length documentaries that have clips, expert commentary about these movies that we love, that we grew up on, that we've discovered. And I think especially with slashers, once you kind of get past that Mount Rushmore of Friday the 13th, Freddy, the Chuckies, there's all these cult classics. So if you're listening to this, you've got through August 14th to order, where you get everything from Blu-rays, posters, booklets, soundtracks, a bunch of cool stuff. You can even get your name immortalized in the credits and be a producer. And then there's this big exclusive year-long event up to the release of Slasher Trash, where you get a bunch of Q&A stuff, a bunch of community sessions, where you can meet other fellow slasher fans. And that's where a lot of this originated from, the Slasher Trash Facebook community. Over 190,000 fellow slasher fans that all love slashers and are probably all backing this documentary. So check it out. Head to slashertrashdoc.com, be a part of the celebration, do it all before the deadline, and let's get started. So Daniel, fair to say, just like Pete and myself, we grew up on these franchises, these horror franchises, the Mount Rushmores, Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, Freddy, Chucky, Hellraiser, these franchises, multiple movies that spanned decades, and to be fair, spanned most of our childhoods as we grew up, whether you're 80s kids like Pete and myself, or like you mentioned, Daniel, you grew up more into the 90s, in the latter days of those Hazion days. I think that's how you say that, of the video store mom and pop VHS era. But those movies just could fill the shelf. You had multiple parts where you could see Jason. And even if part 1 wasn't available, then you could pick up part 4, part 5, or check out the crossover where Jason is fighting Freddy. And I think as we kind of talked about in part 1 of this conversation, the Slasher Trash documentary is trying to move that spotlight maybe a bit away from that Mount Rushmore, from the Chuckies and Freddys, to the more obscure slashers.
Well, we've kind of accepted that the big franchise, the ones that have performed commercially well, like, oh, well, they were good. They were the good ones. That's why we can give Friday the 13th a prestige TV reboot. That's why Halloween gets the, PTSD-themed trauma survivor, clever meta reboot. We've acknowledged from the start that Scream was good because it was kind of riffing on those stuff. But a lot of that conversation has already happened, and I'm glad that it has happened, but we want to go deeper beyond those franchises. We want to get past the well-treaded ground of the Halloweens and the Nightmare on Elm Streets and the Texas Chainsaw Massacres and the Chuckies of the world, and we want to go, okay, but what about all of the forgotten stuff? What was there? What are we missing? What was interesting and credible about the bits that we have lost to time.
Summer camp was all fun and games until the games turned deadly. High school was supposed to be safe until someone started grading in blood. Prom night promised new beginnings, but delivered only endings. It was just a slumber party, but no one would sleep again.
When I was a little kid, I was scared to death to be alone in the dark.
Between the blockbusters and the bottom shelf was a world of films that never got their due. Shot fast, cut rough, remembered forever. This is the story of the forgotten children of the slasher boom and the fans who never let them die. Slasher Trash, the ultimate slasher documentary.
Who's there?
Run! Kill her! Kill her!
Celebrate them all in the ultimate slasher documentary. Slasher Trash.
I have a surprise for you.
She is alive.
Pre-order your collector's edition now and join a year-long celebration with exclusive live events. Plus, get your name in the credits and exclusive collectible merchandise, including Blu-ray, posters, soundtrack, and more. Order your limited edition set by August 14th, only at slashertrashdoc.com.
And we really, really, really want to dig deep on this stuff. You know, we're covering, the primary focus is on 70s and 80s, but we will be looking, you know, we'll be dabbling in things that from across all decades, really, that have material available. And, you know, we'll be looking at, I don't want to give too much away, but there's potential we'll look at stuff that didn't even technically come out, and where's the merit in that? There's lots and lots and lots and lots of ground to cover here. It is not as samey as people would think the franchise label would suggest. Genre label would suggest, sorry.
Let's say there's something really interesting in kind of pulling all of this together too, because you talked about how slashers have this sort of amorphous origin, I would say, because like I think of Hitchcock's Psycho, and that has certainly some what we would consider to be slasher elements to it. That comes out in 1960, same year as Peeping Tom. Like you mentioned, Daniel, you have some giallo movies that are certainly more entrenched in like crime thriller, just by nature of being released in Italy, but certainly helped establish some of the slasher tropes that we think of now, the POV, the gloves, the knife. There's some very concrete visual elements that have now become part of what we call slashers, going back to like Spiral Staircase, you mentioned Straitjacket, Torso, all of those. But also I think the person you mentioned that you were thinking about was Mary Whitehouse, Daniel.
Yes, that's correct. Mary Whitehouse.
Self-appointed guardian of public decency. I think it's like pulling all these things together. Don't know if they come together, but where you had Video Nasties in the UK, we then, not so long after, had the Satanic Panic. And the idea of rock and roll music, heavy metal music being some sort of a gateway to corrupt youth. Same with things like Dungeons and Dragons.
Warning signs of satanic behavior may be apparent, such as a sudden, bitterly antagonistic attitude towards family and religion, a drastic decline in academic performance, a reclusive behavior pattern, and listening exclusively to heavy metal rock music, almost to the point of addiction. When one or more of these warning signs are evident, you should look further for ritual items such as a pentagram or other satanic symbols, black or red robes, a decorative dagger or knife, a chalice or goblet, black candles, a personal diary with a black cover, which is called a Book of Shadows, and copies of publications such as the Satanic Bible and the Satanic Rituals, and possibly a small makeshift altar. If you discover items such as these, experts advise you contact your local law enforcement agency at once.
As all of this is happening, we're all growing up in a world where VHS stores are becoming much more popular. They're becoming more standardized, but they're everywhere. And there's a consumer need, I think, that is being met. You have more stores, they have more shelves. You've got to put more things on the shelves. It almost opened the door for the Charles Bands, Troma, for these smaller studios to make things. And then to your point, for even smaller people, the friends who just got together on the weekends and said, let's just put something together. And a video store owner who said, are you kidding? With some good airbrushed cover art, I'll put it on the shelf. And then there's teenagers like us that don't find Friday the 13th Part 3, but we do find The Prowler, Mutilator, something else that's a little bit maybe lesser known, but makes a big impact because it feels like it checks those boxes. Oh, I think I know what I'm watching, but they're maybe taking some chances either in budget, in creativity, in storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, this is the thing. It is the genre, like, ultimately made by people just kind of rolling the dice on a lot of things.
Look out! Look out! Look out! Take care. You are being watched. We repeat, take care, for you are now alone with a killer. We warn you, don't let him see the fear in your eyes. For this is what he seeks, and this is why he kills.
Where are you? Where are you?
Look out for Carl Byrne as the Peeping Tom. Fear him, but pity him also.
It's no good.
Watch out for Moira Shearer as the lovely stand-in who innocently dances into danger.
Imagine someone coming towards you who wants to kill you, regardless of consequences.
A madman?
Yes.
Take it away!
Anna Massey is the girl who falls victim to the charms of the lonely stranger upstairs.
Switch it off, Mark! Mark, switch it off!
Maxine Audley as the blind woman who senses the danger that threatens her and her daughter, but is helpless.
Don't be frightened.
Frightened. What? So put that camera away!
There is no future for anyone who tries to befriend him. He invades the privacy of innocent people till the piercing eyes of his camera meet the terrified eyes of his victims. And with a compulsion akin to madness, he shoots the final, fearful scene.
You mentioned Peeping Tom there, and Peeping Tom's so fascinating because obviously it came out, a few months before Psycho. In many ways, they're very dissimilar films, and because a lot of slashers, although they have like ubiquitous elements, they have like these huge varied plots and settings and ideas. But like on a pure slasher level, we see similar elements in Psycho as we do in Peeping Tom. I think we decide as a society that Psycho's genius because Hitchcock made it. Whereas Peeping Tom ruined the director's life, basically booed out of the country. it was moral arbiters that kind of decided that, and those people's voices have all sort of quietened now, because unlike their warnings, Peeping Tom did not in fact ruin the entire moral fabric of society. And actually, we now have filmmakers like Martin Scorsese kind of reassessing Peeping Tom and saying like, wow, this was doing really intelligent, clever things. It's exploring the relationship between the viewer and the film as a voyeuristic experience, and like, you know, it puts you behind it did the POV thing, but like in a really intelligent way where it made you kind of part of the kills in a really uncomfortable way. It had a lot of things to say, and it had a lot of bigger ideas than it initially got at the time, and now we herald it as an absolute masterpiece. And what's to say that in a different world, you know, that wasn't one of the forgotten ones, you know, what that wasn't lumped in with the mutilators of the world, and the sledgehammers, and the torsos, and the straitjackets, and the Axum 3Ds, and all of that kind of stuff. It's just because kind of people looked at it and went, hey, actually this had some stuff going. And I'm not saying obviously with Slash Trash we're going to look at everything and be like, oh, this was just as important to cinema as Peeping Tom, because a lot of these films won't be. A lot of these films will in fact be quote unquote trash. But even the trash was, you know, somebody taking a swing at things. Peeping Tom was a risky movie. Psycho was a risky movie. Black Christmas was a risky movie. All of the kind of things that set up slashers, they were big swings. They were risky. They were things people hadn't seen before, things people might be uncomfortable with. And it's only when those same risks were taken by less prestigious directors or were in much greater numbers that we kind of got a little bit up in arms about it and a little bit upset about it. There will absolutely be plenty of gems.
Every year, hundreds of young people disappear. God help those who get caught in the tourist trap. Tourist Trap, the most bizarre motion picture you will ever experience, as three young girls are tricked, terrorized, and trapped in an old museum where human-like dolls have a life of their own. Now they want yours. Tourist Trap, from Compass International.
Rated PG.
Look at something like Tourist Trap. That has like this really eerie vibe to it that's genuinely like effective and chilling even to this day. Like that doesn't come about by accident. That takes craft. And then same thing with like something like Unhinged. There's so many of these films are, you know, kind of sloppy dead teenager movies, and that's absolutely fine too. But, you know, all we're trying to say is like there's merit to it all. Even if the film's not a masterpiece, there's something interesting about slasher films in that you can watch a bad slasher film and still have a very good time, which is not something you can say about a bad drama, or definitely not a bad comedy. A bad comedy is torture. Bad slasher film is great fun.
And to that point, Daniel, I think there's some movies like Jaws and Citizen Kane that, you know, I've seen the multi-hour behind the scenes documentaries that unearth everything about the movie and how it was made. Very rarely do I see the 8-part documentary about the making of A Few Good Men. I don't know if, you know, A Few Good Men memories. You get something like Crystal Lake Memories, Nightmare on Elm Street. You mentioned Chucky, and he's gotten his multi-hour documentary that does a deep dive into the series, into the TV franchise, how it's evolved. I think that's where the slasher trash community also makes sense, where there's 194,000 plus people in this Facebook group that would be the people that would want to watch an 8-part deep dive exploration where you're talking to the filmmakers, the actors, the stuntmen, the makeup folks, people who made these movies that were not all necessarily classics, maybe by other people's measures. But to your point, Daniel, we're all interesting. We're all fun to watch. We're all great to watch, whether it was in your cousin's wood-paneled basement, you discovered it at a drive-thru, at a movie marathon. And it feels like that's where this documentary, Slasher Trash, kind of leans in. You found the tribe, the 190,000 plus people that love to talk about horror, love to talk about slashers. And while the spotlight is certainly hot and heavy on the Wes Cravens, on the John Carpenters, it seems like you guys are moving the spotlight to, like you said, those lesser known friends that got together to make things on weekends, and showing how maybe we've all seen even something like Scream a dozen times, but here's a movie like Tourist Trap that you may not have seen or maybe not even be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to spoil like any of the cast we've got, but like I've certainly been already having the conversations of like, hey, we'd love to interview you. And it's been a real thrill having some of these people be like, what? Like me? Really? And it's like, yeah, no, like you have an interesting story and like you have done something compelling that's worth talking about. And they're just so thrilled. Like, you know, they wrote off their own work as trash. And, you know, it's great to kind of come in and be the one to sort of say to them, and it's like, yeah, and trash is good. Maybe it is trash, but that's good and cool and interesting. And how many other people have made trash? Like, not many people can say they've gone and, you know, made a feature film, regardless of the quality. That's a huge achievement, and it's one worth celebrating, especially when the end product that you created still to this day has a legacy. I mean, thank God for like Blu-ray boutique labels like TerraVision and Vinegar Syndrome. You know, they are real champions of like keeping this stuff alive. There are so many of these films that would have just been lost to time, and there's still so much more work to do. With Slasher Trash, we hope to do a little bit of that work, keeping these films alive, because there's so much merit in these that we just do not want to lose to time. I think it's very telling that some of the people who were shocked that we would even want to interview them are also some of the most requested people for us to interview. I think that's really interesting. It's strange to me that these people don't even know how loved they are.
And again, without you spoiling anything that we might be seeing in the near future, have you found any interesting turns in the making and putting this together that's like really surprised you? Have you gone down any, you know, side paths that you weren't expecting, or have there been discoveries that have really got you super jazzed about putting this project together?
When I've been talking to these people, like, you know, I generally kind of open the discussions with like a conversation, you know, like, hey, let's jump on a call, let's talk about the project, let's talk about what you've done. Even in those conversations, I'm hearing so much great stuff that I'm having to be like, whoa, save it for the doc, you know, like this is incredible, this is exactly what we want to talk about.
You, seated in this auditorium, are about to see select scenes from the most controversial movie in motion picture history. The movie that, for the sake of good taste, should never have been made. Due to the highly violent and grossly obscene content in this film, we are legally only allowed to show you a few select scenes in this theater, but coming soon, you will be able to buy a ticket and see this feature in its original, unedited, uncensored, and uncut form.
Because I don't want to spoil too much, but it was really, really great talking about the violence movie. So for those of you who don't know what the violence movie is, I talked with somebody who worked on this film. And when I say worked on this film, I mean they were 13 years old and made a 20-minute Friday the 13th knockoff on their home video camera with their brother. And then did a sequel and did another 20-minute short film. It was literally, you know, Hockey Mask Killer with a different name because they didn't want to get sued. Even as 13-year-olds, they knew, oh, maybe we shouldn't use those exact same iconography and names. And it is jank. It is, and they called it the violence movie, and it is jank, and they know it's jank. And it is, you know, there's scenes where people are kind of like ducking out of frame when they realize they're in shot. There's stuff that doesn't cut together right, and yet this little essentially in-joke amongst their friends somehow took on a life of its own. I'm listening to this guy tell the story about how, like, you know, it kind of escaped the confinement of their little inner circle, and suddenly they're being asked to put it on, you know, I think it was a Sundance, like midnight movie stream or something like that. It was like a prestigious kind of ask. And, you know, his concern was like, oh man, like, I can't do that because the soundtrack is all just me playing the Friday the 13th Harry Manfredini soundtrack on my vinyl because this wasn't ever supposed to sort of breach containment, if you will. And the interesting thing is, like, you know, the guys who made this, they're now in industry because, like, obviously they started with such a passion. Like, you know, when they were 13, they were making that kind of stuff. They've ended up becoming producers, and, you know, the guy who asked them to appear on this stream was like, hey, well, you're a producer now, you figure it out. And so through a series of events, they actually managed to reshoot stuff for the Violence movie. And they went and approached Harry Manfredini and were like, can you give us a brand new original score for this film we made when we were 13 years old on our home video camera? That all happened. And now that film has like a physical release and a cult following and an original Harry Manfredini score. And it's literally just all built off the passion of literal teenagers who were just like, man, we really like Friday the 13th. Let's do our own Friday the 13th. Let's get some fake blood. Let's get a hockey mask. Let's get a home video camera and let's go wild. And if that isn't just the coolest, most aspirational microcosm of the legacy that slasher films can have and the passion that fans can kind of bring to the genre to keep it alive, to carry the torch, empower it, allow these films to have a kind of legacy long past what should be period of relevance. When I heard him telling me that story, I was like, oh, we are going to find a way to work this in. This is going to be great. And, you know, it's funny, like, our director and writer on this is Michael Gingold, who, if you're in the horror world, you'll be probably very familiar with it if you're kind of passionate about this stuff. You know, he was a former editor and chief of Fangoria. He's wrote several horror novels. He's a Rondo Hatton Award-winning director in this space, doing behind-the-scenes documentaries on horror films and stuff. Before all of this, he was making shot-on-video slashers with his friends, and that is just such a great indictment of how much this stuff matters. This guy who was making slasher films as a teenager, you know, in his back garden, has gone on to be like one of the most notable journalists in the horror sphere and is now working with us to make a documentary on the kind of can-do attitude that spurred him to have that horror career in the first place. I just think that's wonderful.
I did want to ask you a bit selfishly, Daniel, because it seems like, to say the least, the passion for your subject matter is obviously there. I mean, again, it's something that 190,000+ people love to hear about, contribute, and obviously want to contribute to make Slasher Trash, the documentary, a reality. But since Pete and I are both graphic designers, I'm wondering if you could speak to the production, because I know you'd mentioned on another podcast how this was one of the first trailers for a documentary where you hired a voiceover artist, and certainly harkens back to like the Grindhouse era. You could almost hear New York's 42nd Street in that voice. Even that idea, you're talking about the aesthetics, because you have Terabytes, you have the In Search Of series. How do you get your production rocks off? Like, what's about this that you're like, oh, as we're putting together these phone calls and we know who we're going to talk about, as we know the stories they may share, the movies we're going to cover, you know, even like the design of this and how it's going to feel for these 4 hours. You know, how's that been in kind of starting to think about how that production is going to look?
The promo poster is amazing, by the way. So,
Dave Merrill, our artist, he did a lot of our In Search of Darkness posters as well. He is just incredible. He is so good. Actually, Dave Merrill's a good example. Like, how we work with Dave is a good example of how we like try and nail an aesthetic and a vibe with our documentaries. We are a small enough team that where basically every kind of opinion in the team matters. You know, my job as producer is to kind of get all the cast together and help the director with the sort of structuring and scheduling and format of the movie. And I'll be working with Michael in terms of kind of like, what are the key themes we want to nail? Okay, well, who should we be talking to get these themes across? But also, you know, I'll advise on things like the aesthetic choices and style and motion graphics and poster design. So a great instance of how we've kind of done that with Dave Merrill is myself and the executive producer Gareth Morgan, who is the creator of the Slash Trash Facebook community. You know, we kind of reached out to him and were like, hey, we really want to like work with you and your name. We love the name Slasher Trash. We love we love the community you built for yourself. We'd really like to, make something like with your community, surveying them to kind of like really get an idea of like, what do they want to see? And then maybe give them something they didn't even realize they wanted to see. He and I initially were like, okay, this can't look like the In Search of Darkness posters. We love the In Search of Darkness posters, but there is a difference. As much as one falls under the umbrella of the other, there is a distinct difference between 80s horror and 80s slashers. And the 80s are kind of the golden age of slashers. There's a lot of great stuff in the 70s too. I would go so far as to argue Jaws is a slasher. We're allowed to celebrate that one because Spielberg made it and it was a huge critical and blockbuster. But there's definitely an aesthetic to the kind of grungier, low-budget stuff that isn't necessarily synonymous with 80s horror. And so myself and Gareth, we collected up a bunch of reference images of all of these posters, just lots and lots of really classic cover art, as well as some of the new stuff that like a lot of the 4K re-releases have been doing, like stuff like the Vinegar Syndrome. They really understand the aesthetic that people are drawn to with these films, and they've really replicated that with like new artists and stuff. And so we gathered all these up and we're like, we want something like this. What is the design? At that point, when we had all these posters to kind of show people, we all sort of got together and we were like, okay, what's something in slashers that's like a real, key cornerstone of the genre? And it's the POV shot. We sort of had this conversation. It was like the poster should be a POV kill shot. And I think it looks great in the final production. Okay, what kind of films do we want to reference in this? Like, we want to hit a nice range of like some of the more known, but not like, poster boys of the genre, the Nightmare on Elm Streets, the Halloweens. And then so something like that's more known, but not a poster boy, might be something like Sleepaway Camp.
Dear Mom and Dad, I've been at Sleepaway Camp for almost 3 weeks, and I'm getting very scared.
Someone is watching you. Someone is waiting for you. Someone wants to scare you to death.
Oh my God.
Sleepaway Camp. You won't be coming home. Rated R.
So you'll see in the poster there's a sign for Camp Arawak, which is like a little reference to that. And then we're like, okay, but what can we have on it? We'll like have like Hell Night on the TV, and we'll have like the Home Sweet Home tattoo on the killer's hand. The victims in the poster are actually like modeled on different victims from different slasher films. And we just kind of like slowly built up this image, and we worked backwards and forwards with Dave saying, hey, how about we add like a little bit of VHS filter to it? Oh, okay, maybe that doesn't work. How about we take it back and we go the more painterly route? And it was just this constant like back and forth discussion. And eventually we ended up with something, and we knew it was right when all of us looked at it and went, yes, that's the poster. And that'll be kind of our motive, the way that we handle the whole feel of the piece. We really want to nail this sort of it's not quite Grindhouse, but it's definitely like related to Grindhouse, this kind of Grindhouse. You feel that was something we obviously did with the trailer. There was a conscious decision made in-house that like, our In Search of Darkness trailers always like generate a lot of buzz, and they kind of hit the nostalgia buttons that people really resonate with, and they clearly do very well, because otherwise, In Search of Darkness wouldn't be on its fifth entry coming up. But it needed to feel different. It couldn't be the same thing. And so somewhere along the line, we brought in a voice actor. We know what it feels like, and you can tell like societally we kind of and like people in the horror community like know what a trailer should feel like, because we have all those fantastic fake trailers in the Grindhouse double bill with Tarantino and Rodriguez. So one of the models that I gave the team was I'm sure you guys, based on everything I know about your podcast, will have probably seen it. Are you familiar with the Don't trailer?
If you are thinking of going into this house, don't. If you are thinking of opening
don't.
That was my starting point. I was like, guys, we need something like this. And I gave them this. And then so we all sort of worked together on writing and refining the script for it, the prom night, graduations into decapitations, that kind of like playful punchline laden trailer. It was very reminiscent of that kind of like just era and period and the voiceover and narration. And then, it was like an aesthetic choice. Like we got a really, really good starting base with the voiceover actor, but we made the choice to like, let's bring the pitch down very slightly and add like this analog effect. So he kind of sounds a bit crunchy. We had this really high quality voice and it was great. And the trailer looked great, but it was like, it's not rubbish enough. We need to make it a bit worse. We need to make it a bit crappier because there's an interesting quote. I can't remember who it's from, and I'm going to butcher it now. But there's basically someone said that the eras of a media format often become the things that later media formats try to emulate because there's something nostalgic about that. So you say in the trailer the like VHS tracks and the cheesiness of the narration stuff, and obviously with the voiceover, the crunchy kind of analog TV sound to it. If this was an In Search of Darkness thing, even though it's an 80s and nostalgia and we wouldn't traditionally use voiceover in those, we'd probably go for like a much cleaner voiceover because In Search of Darkness's presentation is much cleaner, but we wanted this to be kind of dirty, kind of grungy, kind of cheap. You spend a lot of money to make something look cheap, but like it pays off. Like it has an effect that really feels sincere and honest. And that's something we're going to bring into like the whole production. We've got a really, really great motion graphics guy called Chris Stratton. We're working closely with him. He did a lot of the stuff you see in the trailer. So when the knife kind of like comes in and reflects the poster image, that's all him. Maybe it'll be a little bit like a grindhouse cinema. Maybe we'll do something like around like the theme of like blood. I always get a huge kick out of this stuff. For Terabytes, I had this real amazing moment where I gave our motion graphics guy a brief of like, we need the Resident Evil hallway and there's going to be posters of all, and here's the games that are going to be animating on either side of the frames and stuff. And then he gave me it back and it was just perfect in goal one. It was a phenomenal feeling to just get something and it was like, you have pulled that out of my brain. That is amazing. And I'm really excited to get to that kind of thing where we take it to like the kind of art direction team and we just integrate all of these ideas and motifs, and slowly through the combination of them all, you kind of see a clear vision be constructed that just communicates exactly what we're trying to do. It's all of the little pieces in tandem that will really make it come together, and it's always exciting to see that.
That reminds me a lot of conversations we've had with Chris LaMartina, who directed the WNUF Halloween special.
Don't check your dial, folks. You didn't tune into Transylvania's public access station. No, sir. Tonight is Halloween.
Halloween is Satan's night, the night of the devil.
Reporter Frank Stewart has a special Halloween treat in store for viewers tonight. He'll be leading a group of paranormal experts to the infamous Weber House.
Do you know what happened here in the Weber House? Some people got killed. Their son went haywire.
Frank Stewart and his team of experts will conduct the first ever live on TV seance.
Evil works in mysterious ways, Frank. It's unpredictable.
Are there any spirits in the house?
It's scary.
That's far out.
There's that aura.
Something strange going on in this house. Animal mutilation, paranormal disturbances, devil worship.
Wait, whoa, hold on. This is not staged. Hello?
Is this the work of the devil?
Folks, we are going where no camera crew has gone before. Father, perform the exorcism.
This is not some Halloween prank. The grisly evidence of the supernatural is real.
No. We'll be right back.
You're watching the WNUF Halloween special.
In the conversations with Chris, I think we're all kind of kindred spirits, but his talk about how when he first made it, he wanted to have that authenticity of a VHS tape you may have stumbled onto at a thrift store that feels like a tape that through an estate sale or something was just abandoned. But someone recorded this Halloween special on this potentially realistic channel that is maybe not where you grew up, but was somewhere, but had the same things. The newscasters dressed up as a vampire or the weatherman dressed as a cowboy. It's cheesy, but it feels like where you grew up. And then still running it through VHS because you had to run it through the machines because you could get the Premiere Pro or DaVinci templates and to make it look that way, to try to bring in the artifact thing. But as Chris has mentioned, there's nothing like the real thing. And I think with everything you've talked about, Daniel, there is something about the voiceover, the aesthetic, the posters that all kind of point to a promise to the audience, because the audience, especially because we've grown up with all of those slashers, so we know how this works, so we can kind of see through it. It's the same way when we hear the right voiceover, when we see the right type of artifacting to make it look like VHS. Okay, so it sounds like you're making a documentary that covers this, and now you're showing us all these things that should deliver a promise, that ultimate documentary that covers slashers. Oh, but Jason doesn't seem anywhere on the screen, and neither does Freddy. Oh, so you guys are doing a deep cut. Okay, there's a lot of things about this, I think, just like you mentioned in Terabytes, that Resident Evil Hallway evokes so much. It does so much heavy lifting for you, for the audience. Now it's up to you guys, no pressure, Daniel, to kind of then keep the promise and say, hey guys, no, we're talking to these people that are so excited to share their stories. We think you'll be excited to hear them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, like, to me, one of the key things we want to communicate is like our own passion for this stuff. I'll let you in on a little behind the scenes secret. There was a draft of this trailer that got very far along in the process that did look like an In Search of Darkness trailer. And it had the synth wave, and it had the no voiceover, and it had like a much more like montagey music video-y feel to it. And, you know, we had gone really far into that and just went, you know what, this is not it. This does not work. And with deadlines looming, we scrapped and started the whole thing again, really, really close to our promised, Fangoria release date, because we were just like, hey, this is good. It's a perfectly fine trailer. It's not slash trash. And I think that was worth doing, and it was worth spending the extra money on a voiceover artist, because what we end up with is something that is wholly and uniquely slasher. And I think it's important, if we're going to be telling the stories of these slasher filmmakers, to be sincere to their art form. And I really think we've achieved it in everything so far, and I have no doubts in my minds that we'll achieve it throughout production, because we all care very, very, very deeply about this stuff and about the vibe. It is this vibe that made us fall in love with this stuff enough to even want to make a documentary on it.
Anytime you're putting together something of this magnitude with a crew of people, you have to, I assume, make some compromises, but it seems like you've cleared like a huge hurdle with even just the trailer, because you could have, like you said, like you could have gone with something that would have been perfectly fine, but you knew in your heart of hearts, like, it's not what it needs to be. And so now you've like kind of set the bar for the rest of your production, because now you kind of know the level that you need to achieve. And you've done a couple of these now, and I'm sure that helps, but giving yourself that standard that you know that you can achieve and reach, and then be like, okay, well, so here's where we need to be throughout the whole production, and we get to the end of that, then I assume that you'll be very pleased with.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about how it sets a standard. So one of the things that made us scrap the trailer is we looked at the poster, and the poster, we were like, that is the poster. That trailer is not for the film that poster is advertising. They do not coincide with each other. And the poster was at such a high standard for us that we were like, well, the trailer has to not just match that standard, but match that aesthetic, match that vibe. And that is going to be the exact same thing we carry the film to. The film is going to be modeled from the established tone of the imagery we've already put out, the poster, the trailer. And that tone was established from the very films we want to cover. That is the slasher subgenre. You might find that somebody might be dismissive of this as like, well, if the stories in the thing are good and the film clips are good, like, what does this stuff matter? And it's like, I feel like this is as important as the rest of the doc, because ultimately, if we are to make a documentary that celebrates slashers, it would almost feel insincere if we did it in a way that didn't wholly celebrate the aesthetics, the vibe, the culture, essentially, of the slasher film. You know, we could save ourselves a huge amount of work by just having talking head film clip, talking head film clip, talking head film clip. But that's not what we want to do. That we want it to be its kind of own slasher package. Like, you know, we would love to create a documentary that people look to our doc in 30 years' time and point to that and go, that aesthetic, let's do that. That's the vibe. That's the tone we want to set. Any film, whether you're working in the realm of fiction, whether you're working in the realm of documentary, is the sum of all of its parts. It's not these, you can't, you know, you wouldn't ever go to a film and be like, oh yeah, the sound was completely broken, but those visuals, they carried the whole production. It's like, no, everything needs to complement each other. And that's going to be like a huge part of the production side of things, of like, are these interviews, are these stories, are these clips, are the graphics, is the feel, is it all in service of doing what we want to do, and that is to celebrate the slashers and analyze them under their own merit. And if any one of those things falls short, then it's going to be obvious in the final production. And that's why it's so important to nail every aspect of it.
That's the great thing about this, is that through the crowdsourcing campaign, folks can be a part of that celebration. They just go to slashertrashdoc.com, like you mentioned, obscure slashers, ultimate slasher documentary, aiming for 4 hours. I think, like the In Search of Darkness series, I think folks will probably be pleasantly surprised by movies that they're aware of, but maybe more specifically movies they've never even heard of, and getting into these deep cuts that will be revelations to them, and hopefully will find the way to their to-watch list, whether it's through TerrorVision, Vinegar Syndrome, Tubi, Pluto, wherever you find them, you'll want to find them, because you guys will now give them this sort of tome, this archive, where they can easily look to. The great thing also about the crowdsourcing campaign, you get a number of different pieces of merch that folks can get, from commemorative booklets, posters, the great poster you mentioned, the movie checklist, certificates of contribution. So the good thing is your level of contribution can vary based on how far you'd like to go, up to being like a producer. Daniel, appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time. I think this is an exciting journey. I think more exciting, I think, is, as Pete and I have heard you kind of just be very passionate about this, is same thing. Like when you see the In Search of Darkness, when you see Crystal Lake Memories, you just want to know that the folks that are putting this together, that you're in good hands. Seeing people that are passionate about this, that care about this, that aren't just putting something together for the sake of, that they want to talk to these people. There's a respect for the genre, for the work, like you mentioned, for the craft, spotlighting something that maybe doesn't get much of the spotlight. So thank you for what you're doing. It's very exciting to kind of see how this is all going to come together, and so that folks can hopefully be a part of it. They still have a few more days to do that if they're listening to this.
Great stuff.